required: old license, voter ID under the name Ian Freeman, and a name change document from probate. But no, turns out there was an unwritten requirement. They wanted me to go get some sort of document of name change from Social Security, an agency with which I want no business. I went home to...
I'm just going to tell you, this is testimony, it's not an editorial.
Okay. I'm just trying to read this into the record.
Well, I'll give you the latitude. I don't want to get too far away from what I have to understand and decide.
Gotcha. I went home to do further research and determined that if I changed my name in the DMV system after getting their license in my birth name, that no Social Security document would be required for that. So the next day, I returned to the DMV and turned in my Florida license under the name Ian Bernard and got the New Hampshire DMV temporary license. I had no idea this was a criminal offense, and the DMV ladies never advised me of such. They recognized me from the day previous and were well aware that I had changed my name legally to Ian Freeman, as I had given them the probate document the day prior. I informed them that it was my intention to change my name on the license eventually, but in the interest of time, I wanted to just get the license right away under my Bernard name. I had no reason to believe this would later be considered fraudulent by the state police. So the license was issued, I got the hard copy a couple of months later, and I figured the job was done. I then decided I wanted to run for school board, which I'd done on previous years, under the name Ian Freeman, which again, as I mentioned previously, was the name I had been registered to vote under and had run for office previously. However, I had previously had my voter ID. At some point prior to all this, I had a voter ID with the name Ian Freeman on it. So figuring that it would be easier to get another voter ID quickly than to go through whatever the name change process would be on the license, turns out I was wrong about that, but that's what I thought. I figured it would be more difficult to get a name change on the license than to get the voter ID, because I've been through the voter ID process before. I went to the DMV to get another voter ID. They denied me, and since they knew I already had a license, they denied me since they knew I already had a license, even though it was under the name Ian Bernard. Turns out, the school board let me on the ballot after just signing an affidavit, so I didn't need the voter ID after all. But I tried to get another voter ID in Nashua simply out of curiosity. I wanted to see if the DMV workers who didn't know me...
Can I just stop you?
Sure.
You said at one point the DMV denied you the voter ID.
That's correct.
And then I heard testimony about a Nashua, trip to Nashua. Is that a separate time for voter ID denial?
A separate time.
Okay.
That was at a later date. So just to jump back a little bit here, they denied me since they knew I already had a license, even though it was under the name Ian Bernard. Turns out the school board let me on the ballot after signing an affidavit, so I didn't ultimately need that voter ID after all. But I tried to get another voter ID in Nashua simply out of curiosity. I wanted to see if the DMV workers who didn't know me would also deny me the voter ID, which I thought I should have a right to have by my understanding of the rules of the system. They also denied me. It was these two attempts that apparently put me on the radar of the state police. About a month later, two state police detectives showed up at my door, led by Sergeant Andrew Player, who claimed to be investigating the denial of my voter IDs, but was also investigating me. Even though I know better than to talk to the police, I did so anyway, as I didn't believe I'd done anything wrong in the ID acquisition process, and was curious as to the questions that they would ask. Of course, as I should know, doing nothing wrong won't prevent one from being arrested. Yesterday, the detective returned with another state police officer to ask a few follow-up questions. He told me that even though I had eventually changed the New Hampshire license to the name Ian Freeman, as I had always intended, that since I had gone through the legal name change prior to applying for the license under the name Ian Bernard, that he had a warrant for my arrest. He charged me with 2 Class A misdemeanors, prohibitions, and unsworn falsification, and I'm facing 2 years in jail over a paperwork snafu. And that's what I get for legally changing my name, apparently. I finally went through the probate process, paid them, and then got kidnapped for my efforts. I had no reason to believe that what I did was illegal, and certainly did not knowingly make false statements. I figured my old name was still good, and in point of fact, and the DMV bureaucrats gave me no reason to believe otherwise. Despite their allegations against me, no one was defrauded, and Ian Bernard is not a fake or fraudulent name. It's my given name. Regardless, I was arrested and bailed at State Police Troop C in Keene, then released on PR. When I asked Andrew Player who the victim was in this case, he answered the people of New Hampshire. Yet when I asked him what the appropriate method to make those supposed victims whole, he didn't really process that and instead said something about how sentencing is up to the judge. So let's see, you have a paying customer, me, and the public servants reward me for my efforts to use their system that I'm always begged to use by kidnapping me, holding me for ransom, and then threatening me with 2 years in a cage for filing paperwork in the wrong order. And this is ultimately what this case is all about. As was indicated before, had I gone in on November 6th and gotten the driver's license in the name Ian Bernard, that would have been completely legal. But when I did it on November 8th, it wasn't legal. No one informed me that it wasn't legal. I had no idea that what I was doing was illegal. It wasn't, there was no criminal intent, no fraudulent intent whatsoever, and there never was at any point. Because I believed that the Moskowitz versus Moskowitz decision, which is pretty clear, that you can use whichever name you choose in New Hampshire, as long as it's not for fraudulent, criminal, or wrongful purpose. And I would never defraud anyone. I'm honest in all my dealings, and I know that in my dealings with Andrew Player, when he informed me that there was an obligation to change that name over, that 10-day window of time, I got right on that. I have no interest in going to jail for this. This isn't civil disobedience. I mean, this court is certainly well aware of my history of having some civil disobedience in the past, which I actually haven't had since I think I was last on trial here, which was back in 2011. So it's been a number of years for any instances of civil disobedience. This was not civil disobedience. If anything, this was an attempt at doing what the court had suggested, I think, in the past, and that was to go through the probate process. And if anything, this was nothing more than confusion over, over deadlines and dates and paperwork filings. So,
Okay.
I didn't knowingly do any of those things with criminal intent.
Any questions for Mr. Freeman?
Yes, sir. Mr. Freeman, now when you showed up on November 7th to the DMV with the probate paperwork, the ladies at the DMV indicated you didn't need more than just the probate paperwork, correct?
Oh, I had more than just the probate paperwork on that day. I had some forms of identification, as well as the old Ian Bernard license at that point. What they indicated to me was that I needed to have paperwork from Social Security. That was what I didn't have. I had everything else.
You just said during your testimony, I think far back at the beginning, that you had indicated you couldn't get the Social Security paperwork. Is that correct?
I have an objection to dealing with Social Security.
But there's a difference between what you could do and what you want to do, correct?
I can't do things that are against my moral code and my beliefs, so I cannot deal with Social Security.
But you'd agree with me, an individual can contact the Social Security Administration, let them know of a name change, and get the information that the DMV needs, correct?
An individual who's not me could do that, but I can't do that.
Is there a reason why you can't do that?
I have no interest in dealing with Social Security.
So you're affirmatively deciding not to go through the name change process with the Social Security Administration?
I don't know anything about their process, and I would prefer not to have any interactions with the Social Security folks. I have an objection to the existence of the federal government and prefer to not deal with them at all.
Now you had indicated that at some time prior to November 5th, the DMV must have contacted you and said your license is going to go on to suspension on November 5th, correct?
Okay, glad you asked about that. In the case of the DMV suspension, there was a lengthy hearing that I had at the DMV just to bring the court up to date on this situation. Gene Killam from the Keene Police Department had charged me criminally with, and I forget the exact statute, but Darrell W. Perry was recently in for the same charge. It has something to do, if I may answer the question.
You got to answer my question.
Hang on. Yeah.
He asked about the history of the case.
Ask your question again. I'll let you, I mean, if there's an explanation about in answering the question, you can provide your explanation, but can you answer the question first and then provide your explanation?
Can you ask the question again, please?
You had testified earlier that you knew of the DMV suspension that would go effective November 5th, prior to November 5th, correct?
That was if I did not acquire the New Hampshire driver's license. It would go into effect.
But you must have known that sometime, I'm guessing, in October 2013, correct?
Yes.
That on November 5th, if you did not have a valid New Hampshire license, it would go under suspension, correct?
That's correct.
And then you have a period of time after that, that if you got it within that period of time, you wouldn't have to pay a $100 reinstatement fee.
Correct. I believe that period of time is 2 weeks.
So any time between when you received that notice in October and November 7th, you could have gone and gotten a license under Ian Bernard, correct?
It's true. And the reason I didn't do that was I figured I'd kill two birds with one stone. I knew the probate paperwork was, you know, that I could do the probate name change and then go and get the license under the name Ian Freeman rather than having to get the license under Ian Bernard, then go through probate, then change it to Ian Freeman. I figured I would do it, again, in the interest of efficiency and expediency.
So you knew then, prior to that you would have to, if you got it before November 5th under Ian Bernard, once the probate process continued, once you were granted November 7th, you'd have to get it changed to the license Ian Freeman. You didn't want to go through those steps, correct?
What I didn't want to do was jump through more hoops than was necessary, and I saw it as, I saw going and getting the name change and then getting the New Hampshire license as an easier process. Turns out I should have done it the other way. I should have just gone and gotten the license under the name Ian Bernard, dealt with the probate thing whenever that happened, and then changed it after that. Had I done those things, we wouldn't be sitting here today wasting all of our time. May I explain a little bit further about the November 5th at this point?
No question for you. Let me approach Mark. You have submitted.
He wants to amplify his answer.
I can make a note and come back to that later if he wants to just continue.
I'm sorry, I think I left him right.
Mr. Freeman, this is Exhibit B, correct? You submitted that with the court?
That's the service center document that you are given after achieving the name change. The probate court hands that out.
Okay, and they gave this to you in this case, in your case, correct?
On November 7th, I received that document.
Okay. So now, if you've done research on this process, you received that paperwork from the court, why, when you got a driver's license on November 8th, in the name of Ian Bernard, after reading that, it said you had 10 days, after doing the research you said, why did you wait until Sergeant Clare told you in March of 2014 to change your name on your license from Bernard to Freeman?
I did not process that appropriately and did not realize that. It was just being busy. I own a business and I've got a lot on my plate.
Well, you had just told me on the record, you didn't want to get the license before the November 5th deadline, wait for the probate order to come out, and then have to change it. So you were aware of it before November 5th, correct?
I was aware of what before November 5th? Can you rephrase that?
That you'd have to change your license once the probate process was finished.
I was not necessarily aware of the time frame on that.
Well, you had just indicated the reason you didn't get it before November 5th was because you didn't want to have to jump through that extra hoop.
What I indicated was that the reason I didn't get it before November 5th was because I figured I'd just do it all at once. Was the intention. And that's what I went in on November 7th for, with the intention to do, was to just do it right there, get it all done. That's when I learned I needed this Social Security paperwork, which I had no interest in getting. And that's why I went ahead and just got the license under the name Ian Bernard, because I figured, you know, I would change it eventually, not realizing the 10-day window of time, which you're right, it is on that paperwork, but again, we all get busy and I did not process that appropriately.
You went to the Teen DMV sometime before that name change and tried to get a voter ID card, correct?
Before the name change?
Before you did the change in March of 2014, you went...
That's correct. Yes.
And then before that, March 2014 name change, you went to the National DMV to try to get a voter ID card, correct?
Yes, I believe that's correct.
So you had time to go to 2 different DMVs to try to get a voter ID card. Your testimony here today is you didn't have enough time in that span of time from November to March to get your name changed on your license.
I didn't know what that process was like as far as how difficult the name change process would be. And in this case, what was a sense of urgency for me was that I wanted to run for political office, and I did not have an ID with my name on it. The school board was telling me at that time I needed needed to have an ID with the name Ian Freeman on it to run for office. So that was what gave me the sense of urgency to go into the DMV and seek the voter ID. Now, had I known that changing the name on the license would have been so easy, and it turned out that it was very easy, had I known that, then I would have just gone through that instead, and again, none of us would probably be here today. Ultimately, this whole case is over a series of, a couple of mistakes that, to me, if you are a customer of a business and you make a mistake with protocol, the appropriate thing to do with a customer is to say, hey, you went about this the wrong way. We're sorry if we didn't communicate to you what the appropriate way to do this was, but this is the way that you should have done it, and let's just make sure we get this all straightened out. Instead, I get arrested and now charged and face 2 years in jail. That, to me, is really poor customer service. This was clearly, a mistaken, a confused situation, and anybody would be confused by all of this.
Well, when you went to the Keene DMV to request a voter ID, you never asked them about the process of changing your name, did you?
No, my purpose was to acquire the voter ID.
And when you went all the way down to Nashua and asked
Point of clarification. I didn't drive down to Nashua. I happened to be in town for business. I was there for the Liberty Forum. I had an hour free and decided I wanted to go and experiment and see, if one could acquire a voter ID there.
However, when you went to the Nashua DMV about the voter ID, you never asked the Nashua DMV what the process was to change your name on your license, did you?
Perhaps I should have, but no, I didn't. Again, none of that is a criminal intent at all. This is just confusion over a system that's very obtuse.
I have no further questions.
All right, based on the questions you were asked, did you want to add anything?
Let me review my notes if you don't mind. Yeah, there were a couple of things I wanted to add. It's my right